Hello everyone, this is the first part of a little mini-series I'm going to be doing about the Klingon invasion of Krios, and it's a fundraising series to raise funds for Ukrainian Refugees. The charity, you can see by the side of the video, is Catholic Relief Services. Please, if you can, give what you can to support this effort. Without any further ado, we'll get on with the video. So today's video is going to be just an overview of the canon history of Krios, because there is in fact a little mini arc across two different Star Trek series, across three separate episodes, that start to reveal and build up the story of Krios and its culture and its history. This video is going to largely consist of the canon information, and then next week I'll do a video which is more of my head canon and is more detailed and lore rich, and is of course going to be influenced by what is canon. The first episode to mention Krios is Next Generation's The Mind's Eye, which I believe is season 4. Now, Krios is really incidental in this episode. It's really just any other alien planet, although it is interesting because it's the first time we see a Klingon vassal planet, and it's interesting how the Federation deals with it, because, you know, they don't really believe in the whole thing of, you know, imperialism. It's not even that they're looking the other way, they're just kind of accepting it as, this is how things are done round here. Prime directive and all, I guess. So it's quite interesting in that respect. Obviously, the main plot line is, of course, Geordi being a Romulan sleeper agent, and the Klingon ambassador is a Romulan spy, and it's a Romulan plot. This is all good fun and plays into that narrative, but it's the first mention we have of Krios, and there are some interesting things. What we know is that the Kriosians are rebelling against Klingon rule. There is an insurgency on the planet that is resisting Klingon rule. It's unknown if this has been an ongoing thing or a new thing. It sounds more like a new thing, probably because of Romulan agitation and support for it in order to destabilize the Klingon Empire. It also kind of shows the state of decay of the Klingon Empire. You could sort of imagine that in the 23rd century, the Kriosians would not dare rebel against the Klingons, because these are the 23rd century Klingons. Not only are they ruthless and brutal, but they're smart. They're very smart and very powerful technologically. So it's interesting to think that, this is something that's recent, and it's a sign of decline of the Klingon Empire in the 24th century, as it has been stagnating really since Khitomer. The Klingon ambassador then says, we'll maybe let them have autonomy or something like that. We can always reconquer them later. It's a funny little sort of fatalistic look at kind of Klingon culture and geopolitics. It's like, we can conquer them later, it's fine. Don't worry about it. And maybe the Klingons kind of like having this little insurgency because it keeps them sharp. It's something to do. But it's not too serious, all things considered. So that's the first episode, and that's really all we get detail-wise from Krios. We also see the planet itself, and we see that it's green. It's very green, and maybe it's because it's a Klingon planet, and Klingon planets are green. Look at Kronos. But Kronos is green because Praxis exploded and threw radioactive waste and stuff into the atmosphere or something like that. Krios is just a normal planet. Maybe it's a forest planet. That would be very interesting. So that's my thinking, is that Krios is actually some kind of forest planet. The next episode to feature the Kriosians is 2 years later. It's The Perfect Mate, where Captain Picard gets with Famke Janssen, and we learn what Commander Riker uses holodeck 4 for. You don't want to know. Aside from that, the main plot of Krios, there's a little bit of sort of suggestion of progress, right? Because now we're talking to the Kriosians directly, and they're undertaking this foreign relations effort. So perhaps Krios has been granted some level of autonomy in the Klingon Empire. Maybe it's not significant, but they're allowed to basically pretend that they're, ruling themselves, but they're ultimately still beholden vassals to the Klingon Empire. We also learn here of the ancient feud with the planet Volt, which is neutral and is referenced in other materials to have never been conquered by the Klingons. So the Voltees, when we see them, we only see one, but they look basically the same as the Kriosians, slight variations, but I imagine that is just a slight variation. So what it looks like is that the Voltees were some kind of Kriosian that were never conquered by the Klingons. So that's interesting. I wonder why that happened, and I wonder if that plays into why there was a falling out between Volt and Krios. Something to think about. And that is the sign of the final reconciliation between the Voltees and the Kriosians, and I guess the sort of rejoining of these two planets. Now, we don't really know what happens post TNG. There's some beta canon out there which suggests that they joined the Federation. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Their fate in the kind of post-TNG, post-Dominion War era is really going to be dictated by what happens to the Klingon Empire, which we still don't know. So I think the fate of Krios is ultimately going to be tied to whatever happens to the Klingon Empire post-Dominion War. Now we get to our third and final episode. And this is an Enterprise episode. It's called Precious Cargo. It's a bit of a play on Taming of the Shrew, much like Elan of Troyes. Essentially, your main character, in this case Tucker, has to help this sort of bratty, entitled, really annoying princess, out of some kind of danger or peril. And they eventually warm to each other. A pretty basic and simple plot line, but there's a lot of little details in there which I think are worth picking apart. One of the first things that immediately jumped to me when I rewatched it is, for a little bit, we can't hear her talk properly. We hear her talk in her native language because the universal translator, for whatever reason, wasn't working properly. I find that quite interesting because her language, if you listen to it, okay, it's being spoken by a reasonably sort of soft accented, beautiful woman, but it, in terms of sounds and vowels and consonants, is very Klingon. It wouldn't take much to change your pronunciation of these same words, and you'd be sounding very Klingon. So there does appear to be some kind of linguistic connection between the Kriosians and the Klingons. I don't know if that's just sheer coincidence. Maybe it's genetic proximity because, of course, of the seeding of the Alpha Quadrant, or it's one that's resulted from cultural exchange between the two. We don't know, but that is certainly something that's worth remarking upon. The other interesting thing that immediately just jumped out to me is, so she's abducted by these Retellian mercenaries. And you look at these Retellians, there's two of them, they have a really crappy little ship. Like, it's pathetic, it's a joke of a ship. And there's only two of them. And I'm like, how have you grabbed someone this important? And do you really expect to escape the Kriosian military in a little rubbish little freighter like that? You don't think they'll just show up, blow through the two of you, because there's only two of you, you can't really defend yourselves effectively, and retake the princess. It doesn't seem like much of a good plan. So she thinks that they're perhaps holding her for ransom. And I'm like, well, if they are, they're not very bright, because they've not got enough of them to defend her should the Kriosians just try to snatch her back. So it doesn't really work. Equally, you could ask, perhaps, were there more Retellians? Were there more on this crew? And actually, in the mission to capture her, when they went and captured her, they lost like a whole bunch of people. Which would explain, because otherwise, how do you get someone this important this easily? Here's my thinking. Somebody was paying them to capture her. And perhaps somebody was also, this is starting to allude to other things, but perhaps somebody also arrange things so that they would be in a position where they could kidnap her. Just some supposition there, but it does look suspicious that these losers could have managed to kidnap someone this important. So I suspect there's other things going on there. I'll leave it at that. Her title is the First Monarch. So she's First Monarch, but she will ascend to the position of Sovereign, I guess. But essentially she's a princess and she's going to become Queen when she succeeds her father. Also, it doesn't sound like she was always going to be Queen. It sounds like the king eventually chose her. I'll just get on to that detail in a bit. Another sort of minor detail is we now know the name of the military. It is the Kriosian Sovereign Guard. And they have quite a good-looking ship, and I'll get on to that in a second too. We also learn that it's a very classist, very highly stratified society with, different castes and your aristocracy and your peasantry and commoners and stuff like that, which I find quite interesting. Yeah, it's a very stratified society. So the reason I brought up her being chosen for succession, which is something some monarchs did, so namely the Russian Tsars up until Paul I could choose their successors. Paul I got rid of it, and that really buggered up the Russian monarchy in 1917, let me tell you, because they had one son, and that one son was haemophiliac. He was in no fit state to rule a country. Anyway, getting off my historical tangent. So that's perfectly normal for a monarch to be able to pick their successor, and so it suggests that she was chosen. Not sure, we don't know why specifically she was chosen, but also, here's another detail. When she was named as successor, she was no longer being courted. So she was being courted at one point by many men, but that all stopped when she was named to the throne, and I doubt it's because the sovereign will remain unmarried. That doesn't make sense. I know, you do have examples in history of like Queen Elizabeth I who remained unmarried, but that's a very specific example, and I think there are plenty of other instances where they didn't. I wonder why she was no longer being courted. Was it possibly, because we know this is a thing in this society from Perfect Mate, was it possibly that there had been a marriage arranged as part of her ascension to sovereign? She would then also take a consort, and this was arranged, and this would be, someone politically significant. This was done for political reasons. Again, we don't know, but I would definitely very much heavily speculate that, and I've got some ideas rolling around in my head as to who that might be and why that might be. Last thing I'll mention is at the end of the episode, her and Tucker get rescued, and we see the Kriosian battle cruiser. It's a very nice looking ship. I love the paint job, blue and gold. That's very in right now, very in. So good choice there. It's a very big ship, or good size ship. It's 220 meters long, so it's basically the same size as Enterprise, although a little bit leaner and agile compared to Enterprise. I won't go too much into technical details because I'll have a future breakdown on that, but I will also just remark that obviously it's a reuse of the Acatrarian warship from Voyager, which is, a while ago now, and that itself was also reused as the Lockherum warship. It was a model they like to reuse a lot, but there's some little differences here, not least in the excellent livery. The model is also used in Enterprise in the episode Horizon as a pirate ship, as this large pirate cruiser that comes for the cargo ship, which I find interesting because perhaps it suggests that pirate ship was Kriosian made. From what we hear of the Kriosian sovereignty, it's a big empire that spans many, many star systems, apparently hundreds of worlds. That might be hyperbole on Princess Katima's part. They're not insubstantial power in this period, and certainly this starship does certainly give us a sense of that. These are pretty significant aliens, and certainly they're certainly a step up above those Retellian losers in their little cargo ship. They're, vastly better. That's it specifically for the canon information. Now, there is also a little bit of beta canon from the Enterprise novels, not much, but essentially, Katayama ascends to the throne as predicted, and later on, Commander Tucker will go to her to ask for her help in the Romulan Earth War. But she cannot help because she is facing some kind of internal crisis. And then between then and original series, the Kriosian Empire will fall and is conquered by the Klingons, while the system of Vault Minor remains free. That is all we know. So that's the canon information there. So on one level, it's very sparse. There isn't much necessarily. But when you dig into the details, especially in the details of Precious Cargo, there's interesting things going on with the Kriosian Empire. And perhaps they were building towards some kind of arc in the later seasons of Enterprise. Where they were doing, the run-up to the Romulan War. We can only guess, but certainly it's very interesting. And so, like I say, there's a lot to chew on and digest, and it's certainly given me lots of material to work with. Even though it is quite sparse, it is actually enough for me to draw some key conclusions, which I'll get onto in the next video. Thank you guys for watching. Please, if you can donate, anything you can give is greatly appreciated. If you cannot donate, do not worry. The ad revenue from this video will also be going towards this campaign. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you again Friday or Thursday evening. Normal upload time. See you next time.